Okay, I think it worked.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So, my name is Dominique, and I'm a third grade reading teacher. And I read the 2021 Horizon Report.
Okay. My name is Andrea Thompson Spears, and I am a fifth grade reading teacher, and I read the 2018 Horizon Report.
My name is Nancy Garcia. I am an HISD trainer, and I read the 2017 MC Technology Nordic Schools Report.
Perfect. So, Andrea, you were on a roll already before we start. So
I was. So I was saying that the 2018 report that I read for this week was pretty much the precursor to the report, the 2020 report that I read for last week's assignment. Everything that they predicted in the 2018 report, which I read this week, last week was confirmed in the 2020 report. So it's funny how these reports are for higher ed though, and I'm seeing these things on the elementary level. It is already trickled down to the elementary level. Like for instance, well, Nancy can speak to this because we're both in HISD. Are you in HISD too?
Yes.
Dominique, are you?
I'm not.
Okay. So it talks about let's see, like platforms for data and streamlining how we look at student data and having something that pretty much does the data analysis for you. Well, we use OnTrack in HISD. It literally, once you upload your assessment and you tell them your standards or your TEKS, it pretty much does all of the other work. Whereas, because I've been in education for 17 years, when I first started, we had to do all of this stuff by hand.
Wow.
Had to figure all of these different standard analyzations and student response. All of those things were all done in your head and put on pieces of paper, and it does it all for you. It will disseminate data and everything for you. Like being a reading teacher, we do a lot of small group. I plug in all of my parameters. It spits everything out for me. I don't have to, and I'm pretty tech savvy. I mean, it's kind of hard to be a teacher these days and not be tech savvy. So that's one of the things it talked about. It also talked about collaboration among your colleagues and students, and having a way to do that without actually meeting. Well, we do that all of the time. Like I use Google. Like I'll add everybody I want to see the document. We work on our lesson plans together at the same time. Like we're literally manipulating the document at the same time. So, or even like what we're doing now, this Zoom meeting. I mean, 10 years ago, this wouldn't have happened. You don't even have to go, because I remember my mom, it's funny, my mom being in grad school, and they had to go to the library and meet, and we would be there all night long with her and her groups who she had to meet in grad school. And I'm like, and she calls me all the time and she asks me, so do you have to go meet your group? Yeah, on my Zoom. And it's just like, oh, well, that's convenient. It's like, yes, from the comfort of my home. So it talks about that makerspace, which is very huge. And I would like to see that more incorporated in the classroom, the elementary classroom here. I did it when I worked in Atlanta. There was a collaboration with Atlanta Public Schools and the elementary school that I worked with in Georgia Tech. And they had this makerspace trailer that they would bring to the school. And the kids would literally, they made video games and coding. So the other students would come in, and it was like projected on the gym wall. And the kids got to play the video games that their friends made. They did all kinds of STEM projects. They made stuff with 3D printers.
Oh
It
my
was
gosh,
amazing.
that's so fun.
It was, and they were so engaged. Like they would get upset if somebody, they would use that as like a disciplinary action and take it away. Like they would really be livid because they wanted, I never seen that kids wanted to go to the class. So that was something that
Oh,
they talked about in the article, and I was like, oh, to see it on the elementary level.
yes.
Yes. So it's interesting. I'm sorry, I just monopolized so much time.
No, you're
No, but
good.
it's interesting.
It is interesting.
It is very interesting. That's a lot of good information.
Yeah.
And so when I was hearing you talk about like how you're seeing like some of the things in the Horizons reports like trickle down to elementary, I kind of felt the same way. So I read the 2021, and I don't know if we were supposed to read the whole report or just like a certain section, but like I just read the section on like key technologies and practices. And
Okay.
so all of it was over like security, digital security, internet security. And so
Yes.
like it was really, really neat. And I really felt like, because at first I was very overwhelmed because I'm like, I know the technology I need to know and I'm good.
Hmm.
So like when I was like, I'm looking at these 7 pages, I don't know what to do with it. But it was really neat because it talked about here's the panelists and here's how we pick them. And then
Okay.
here's what we asked them to do. Here's the
Hmm.
parameters we gave them, and here's how they were supposed to evaluate. So that helped me go, okay, so there was like a process. And it was really neat to kind of read about like the panelists, they're all from different places. So they all have a different background.
Yeah.
And so their job was to assess different things and different practices that would affect higher education when it comes to security. And
Okay.
so once they picked, they went through like a whole voting process. They ended up with like, I think they ended up with like 5 or 6 different practices. And they
Hmm.
had to evaluate each practice. And they evaluated it on cost, how useful it's going to be, how the user is going to receive it, how does it make, your lessons and all that equitable.
Yes.
Um, it went through all of that. And so a lot of the things they talked about were like using like Google Cloud or like using Microsoft Cloud and how
Yes.
that impacts things. And so I'm like, oh, we do that all the time because like
Absolutely.
my district is Google. Everything's Google. Lesson
Hmm.
plans, Google. CCUs and data, Google. Like it's all Google and it's all saved together. I mean everything. We have Google emails and everything. It's crazy.
Okay.
Yes. And so like then another thing they talked about was like how do we they called it endpoint detection response. I had to Google it. But basically what that means is how do we, because a lot of times when we're using things, I'm like, my kids do it all the time. I don't know how they do it. But like they'll click on something wrong or they'll click on something they shouldn't and they get a virus. So how do
Hmm.
we stop it at the endpoint? So like your computer would be the endpoint. How do we stop it from there? And how do we
Yeah.
figure out how to not affect the rest of the network?
Right.
I mean, we talked about multi-factor authentication. So like different, so we might sign on this way, but then we might also sign on this way. And like my kids do that all the time. They sign to their Chromebook one way, and then they sign into ClassLink another way, and then they sign.
Yeah.
But
Because when
it's
we get
really
on class, we have to do that with the Blackboard because it goes through
yes,
the
Mhm.
duo push thingy. Hmm.
yes. And so like I see all that, and I'm like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. And
Hmm.
like there was even a whole section on like having authentic data and like the integrity of your data. And like we
Yes.
talk about that all the time, like in my classroom, like we're good digital citizens. These are all the expectations I have for you. But like these are all the things that you have to be aware of. And these are sites that are typically okay. And this is how you can
Yeah.
tell like if the site's like actually factual and like if it has a good integrity. And I'm like, they're talking about it, like you said, like on this higher educational level, but I mean it trickles down. And I
It
think a
trickles
lot
down.
of it is, especially after COVID, like we're in a digital age. We are on a whole new ground. And
Absolutely.
Yep.
these kids that are coming up, they're more tech savvy than I do.
Yes.
I don't know half of the things they know, but I thought it was really, really interesting. And to go through each process and the way they evaluated everything, it was really, really interesting. I liked it a lot.
And with me, it's about the same thing. And we're learning from Andrea, like everything that we're doing right now for training for staff, we're actually taking that from teachers. And the way that they model all of this for the students, it has been dynamic. I mean, I've never seen this type of era. And I come from Andrea's mom's kind of generation. And we sat around the table and we never had these meetings and so on and so forth. I was however, really, really blessed because of course, we grew up in that era and I always worked for higher ed. So it's never been anything that's something that I can adapt to.
Right.
But it does have its challenges, especially now, when we had to go through the whole COVID thing and HISD was not prepared for that.
No.
We had a lot of safety issues. We had a lot of issues with students, but the teachers were the ones that made the difference. They were the ones that were up on IT. They're the ones that taught us. So we're the ones learning from the way that you based everything,
Yeah.
which kind of led me to my report, which 2017. And I thought, well, what's the technology outlook, for especially for Nordic schools, and they have everything so together. Their classes together, digitals together, they have everything before a crisis set up. Whereas HISD, we had none of that.
Nothing.
Nothing.
We didn't
We
either in
had
my
kids
district.
standing around waiting for computers,
Yes.
and teachers were, if it had not been for the teachers keeping it together, and I hate to say that really loud, but we would have failed as a district, I think. And a lot of the trainers would always tell me, well, what do you mean by that? I said, honey, we don't have anything in check for, the security for payments went down the drain. Security for the double, being able to authenticate the second time, none of us were prepared. None
Right.
of these laptops were prepared for teachers. Teachers had been crying out a year before, hey, get us on board. We had Harvey. There's a lot of things going on. Nobody listened. So when this came about, now they're listening. Now
Yes.
they're coming, and they're asking, what is their platform like? So we're having to go out to the schools, get with the schools, find out what they're doing to get and check with these students. This report right here was that 3D printing, and how they did everything for that. And the reason that these schools are doing it, or these, nations are doing that, is because they have a shortage of employees. So they're starting their students off early so that they can later be those employees.
Yes.
Great platform. As for us, I think it just kind of tied in really, really well with the other report, but we're learning lessons from you guys. Which I hate to say that because there's so many great trainers out there, but they lack the ability to be able to think on their feet, when it comes to new and innovative ideas on how to teach.
And to be honest, we have no choice.
Mm-mm.
When you're sitting there with 20 to 25 children looking at you and you have to keep them engaged, you have got to be able to move quickly.
And that's something I think that we're lacking. We deal so much with the staff that we forget how to reach out to them and what platform they're learning on. We happen to think that everybody across the board should know this. So
Right.
we have a lot of variation. We have a lot of employees out there. 100 languages are spoken at HISD.
Yes.
And
Oh,
we have to cater to everybody. And everybody across the board has to know how to do their emails, how your authentication works, where you can sign on, where you can't sign on, what's permissible, what type of platform do you learn from? So this report right here was phenomenal. I'll go more into detail, of course, when I write it out, but I do think this right here was super important for us, that it does speaks about technology, speaks about learning, the learning spaces that they do offer the students so that the students can kind of get an understanding of how to set up the whole, how they're learning themselves. So it kind of gives them that edge of, this is how I learn and this is what I want you to do, and kind of feed all of that into that computerized program, and it spits out exactly what they need. So it's an interesting format that they use, and I'm hoping that we kind of are able to match that somehow, in the near future. But it does, it talks about the trends and everything else that goes along with that.
I feel like I need to read that report. So like my district is teeny tiny. We're 30 minutes down past Angleton. I mean, we're little. It takes 3 towns to make up our district. So we have a primary, we have 2 elementaries, a junior high and a high school. That's all we have.
Wow.
So when COVID hit, it was like, what are we gonna do? Like we straight up, like that half year when we were like, it was like in March or something, we straight up like gave up on computers, and we teachers were at
What's
school,
make
we had
packets?
packets, assignment packets, and oh,
I'm so embarrassed. I'm like, no, don't say it. Don't say
no.
it.
Well, no, because I have, so the first school district, I'm originally from Louisiana. And my friends who are teachers in Louisiana, that is exactly what they did. They were like, we're at the school making packets. And I'm like, what? It's just like, yes, we have to make packets. And then they stand outside and wait for all the parents to come and pick up the packets. And
Yep.
this is me. And they're like, so what are you doing? I emailed it to them. I had Google. Well, we didn't have Google Classroom, but we had Teams. I said I put a link on Teams. I put a link on Class Dojo. I put a link on. I sent emails. I was done. I was like, no, I don't. Actually, I found it much easier to teach digitally because
Really?
I'm very technology based in my classroom. Like, for instance, I don't have enough classroom textbooks, so I use the online
Oh, okay.
version. And all of my kids in 5th grade, they're 1-to-1. Everybody has a Chromebook at my school. So as soon as they walk in, they know I have assigned them their story for the day or the week. They go on to the Clever app and pull up their story, and all of the things that we discussed, our interactive notebooks, all of that is coming from that story. So, or if there's something else I want them to do, I know that I have groups set up on my email, and I email the class the link. So the kids who are absent get the
You're
link
shocking me.
as well. Well, I mean, COVID taught me these things. It's like, no,
Yeah.
we have got to streamline this process. And then when we went back into the schools and kids were going and coming because of the different COVID outbreaks, and nobody was there consistently, but I still had to provide you. And I mean, the district did a great job of giving us online activities, but my parents were like, no, we want exactly what you're working on. So my school, we just send it out. We send it on their email. Oh, I know the fifth grade team does. We send it via email.
That's crazy. So when we did online, we did hybrid. So we let the kids come back day one, but the kids could opt out of coming and they could do virtual.
Absolutely.
And the way that we did it, it was a lot of work. So every team, so like at my school on the 3rd grade team, there's 5 of us. So 4 of us had in-person classes. 1 of us had all the online kids.
Okay.
And so we did that the whole way. We did through Google Classroom, and where I'm like our town is really small. Like our parents are working on the pipelines, or they're working in the prisons, or they're working like very blue collar, very much. So like the kids' parents, they weren't home. So like it was a mess there for a while. And I would say like within the first 2 weeks, I had half my online kids back in school just because the parents were like, I can't do it. Or I don't have the internet connection, or like I got a virus on this computer and I don't know what to do. So it was interesting to say the least. And so what ended up happening was all my kids came back within like by December, most of them had come back. And so I had about 12 online. So then I became self-contained in class with the kids online. And so like we were trying to do it simultaneously. It was a hot mess. So like I'm still trying to teach myself and get it going, because I went from being self-contained last year. Now I have 3 classes. So I went from having, 20 kids to like 70 kids. So it's been interesting. So I'm trying to find ways, kind of like you are, like how you've been doing, like putting it online and stuff. Because I'm like, we've all got a Chromebook and it'll make my life a lot easier if you can figure it out online.
Absolutely.
Has it helped any to minus out the, how a lot of the times you kind of get sucked into, you put something together for students or for whatever, and you have to base it on their personality. Now, online, there is no personality. There's mainly just, you're doing everything online and you minus that out completely. Has that changed a lot of how you set up now?
So the way I approach that is I give very much how Dr. Crawford gives us assignments, and she'll have multiple platforms to use to create. I'll do the same thing. So let's say for instance, you used Flipgrid last week. They'll do Flipgrid. They can make a PowerPoint presentation. You can do an animation movie. It just depends, because there's one that can be used. It makes a comic strip.
Mm-hmm.
I let them choose. The delivery is your choice. I just have just like pretty much this class, I have certain things. You have your writing piece. This is the rubric. This is what I need from you. Now, how you present that information to me is solely up to you. So whatever, and I kind of handle that like when I do project-based learning and you're doing a presentation to me, you get to choose how it's presented to me, whether it be a monologue, a 3D diorama, whatever. But you have
your mind must be all over the place. That
yes,
is a
I have
lot
ADD.
to keep up with. Wow.
I am ADD. It's all the time.
That is just like 24 hours move. And you have to think ahead of the game. I mean, forget about the computer programs. You're thinking every child computer program, how you're going to lay it out. And I think that with this one right here, with this Horizon program, or this Horizon report, sorry, that kind of puts into perspective how they set up for every single student. And that kind of puts it in their own hands. Technology is in their hands. So no longer are they responsible for all of these roles that you're doing. I mean, you could go be an IT tech at this point and set up things like that. That's beyond normality. Most teachers won't do that though. In all fairness, HISD does have its teachers that will sit back and say, well, no, you're either going to give me this and it has to be A, B, C.
Yes, and I do come in contact with those people quite often. So I guess that's why I'm here.
And those are the ones that I deal with.
I completely understand, because we have them in our building and they're like, no, I'm not doing all of that. That's too much. And I'm like, you do realize that these are 21st century learners, right? They don't learn like we learn. They're not going to sit in a desk with a pencil and paper. And me being ADD actually helps the situation, because I put myself in their shoes. How can I get it? Because I can't sit down with a pencil and paper and just, it's just understanding happens. It does not happen like that with me.
And what grade level are you teaching? Fifth. Wow. And you're teaching 3. I'm like, I am just sit back, because that's a lot of stuff you're taking on. That's not just a teacher's role. That is now into the whole. Now I understand how the technology, the teaching, how all of those standards have changed.
It has.
It has.
Hey, random question. It says that we only had 40 minutes to do this, and it wants me to stop my recording. Do y'all care if I stop it? Just so we don't lose
because I think we've satisfied everything for the class. There are probably